She stumbled into the rain with blood on her lip and shame in her chest. Nadia wasn't supposed to be there. She wasn't supposed to be anywhere near the alley behind the old liquor store, where the ground smelled like gasoline and forgotten dreams. But desperation has a way of stripping dignity from people, and Nadia had been desperate for 3 months straight. Her daughter was sick, not the kind of sick that goes away with rest and warm soup, but the kind that demands medicine she couldn't afford, treatments she couldn't pronounce, and a future she couldn't promise. The hospital bills stacked higher than her resolve, and the debt collectors stopped calling because they knew there was nothing left to take. So when the loan sharks offered her money, she took it. When they wanted it back with interest she couldn't pay, she ran. And when they found her tonight, they made sure she understood what happens to people who think they can escape. The rain mixed with the blood on her face, washing it down her neck in thin pink streams. Her ribs ached where they'd kicked her. Her knees were scraped raw from the pavement. But it was the laughter that hurt most. The way they mocked her while she begged. The way they told her she was nothing, worth nothing, would always be nothing. She didn't know where she was going. She just knew she had to move. Before we go on, tell us, where are you watching from? Drop it in the comments below. The street was empty except for the sound of her own breathing and the distant hum of traffic on the main road. Nadia pressed a hand to her side and tried to steady herself. The world tilted. Her vision blurred. She thought about her daughter, asleep in the tiny apartment they shared, unaware that her mother was bleeding in the rain with nowhere left to turn. That's when the car appeared. It was black and sleek, moving slow like a predator that had already cornered its prey. The headlights cut through the downpour, and Nadia froze. Her first instinct was to run, but her body wouldn't obey. Her legs trembled. Her breath hitched. The car stopped beside her, and the back door opened. A man stepped out. He was tall, dressed in a coat that looked too expensive for this part of town, and his eyes were the kind that saw everything and gave nothing away. He didn't speak right away. He just looked at her, at the blood on her face, the bruises forming on her arms, the way she was holding herself together with sheer will alone. Then he said it. "Why are you bleeding?" His voice was calm, almost gentle, but there was something beneath it that made her chest tighten. Not threat, exactly. Authority, the kind that didn't need to be announced. Nadia opened her mouth, but no words came. What could she say? That she owed money to men who didn't care if she lived or died? That she had tried everything and failed? That she was tired of fighting a world that kept pushing her down? He took a step closer, and she flinched. He noticed. He stopped. "Get in the car," he said. It wasn't a command. It wasn't a request. It was something in between, and Nadia felt the weight of it settle over her like a blanket she didn't ask for but desperately needed. She should have said no. She should have walked away. But the rain was cold, and her body was broken, and the idea of one more step felt impossible. So she got in. The door closed behind her, and the world outside became a blur of water and shadow. The man sat across from her, his expression unreadable. He didn't ask her name. He didn't ask what happened. He just watched her with the same quiet intensity as if he were reading a story written in her scars. Nadia pulled her knees to her chest and tried to make herself smaller. She didn't know who he was, but she knew enough. Men like him didn't stop for women like her out of kindness. They stopped because they saw an opportunity, or use, or a debt waiting to be collected. "Where do you live?" he asked. She told him the address, her voice barely above a whisper. He relayed it to the driver without taking his eyes off her. The car began to move. Nadia stayed at her hands. They were shaking. She clenched them into fists, willing them to stop. She wouldn't cry. Not in front of him. Not in front of anyone. "You're hurt," he said. "I'm fine." "No, you're not." She didn't argue. There was no point. The truth was written all over her, and he had already seen it. The drive was silent except for the soft hum of the engine and the rain against the windows. Nadia's mind raced. She thought about her daughter waking up alone. She thought about the men who had beaten her and whether they would come back. She thought about the man sitting across from her and what he would want in return for this ride. When the car stopped in front of her building, she reached for the door handle, but his voice stopped her. "Who did this to you?" Nadia's hand froze. She turned to look at him, and for the first time, she saw something flicker in his eyes. Something cold and sharp. "It doesn't matter," she said. "It does." "Why?" He didn't answer. He just held her gaze, and Nadia felt the air shift between them. There was a promise in his silence, one she didn't understand yet but could feel settling into her bones. "Thank you for the ride," she said, and got out before he could say anything else. She didn't look back as she climbed the stairs to her apartment. She didn't let herself think about the way his voice had sounded when he asked her that question. She just focused on putting one foot in front of the other, on getting inside, on locking the door behind her. But as she stood in the darkness of her living room, listening to her daughter's soft breathing from the next room, she couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed. That the night had cracked open in a way she didn't know how to close. And somewhere in the city, in a car that moved through the rain like a shadow, a man made a phone call. His voice was quiet, controlled, and final. "Find them," he said. "All of them." By morning, the men who had mocked and fought Nadia would learn what it meant to be seen by someone who didn't forgive. Nadia didn't sleep that night. She sat in the dark with a towel pressed to her lip, watching the hours crawl by on the clock. Every sound made her jump. Every creak in the hallway made her hold her breath. She kept expecting them to come back. The men with their fists and their laughter. The ones who had made her feel like doubt beneath their shoes. But they didn't come. When the sun finally rose, pale and hesitant through the grimy window, she checked on her daughter. The girl was still asleep, her small chest rising and falling in the rhythm of dreams Nadia couldn't protect. She looked so peaceful, so unaware of how close everything had come to falling apart. Nadia kissed her forehead and whispered promises she wasn't sure she could keep. Then she went to the bathroom and stared at herself in the cracked mirror. The bruises were darker now, blooming across her cheek in shades of purple and blue. Her lip was swollen. Her eyes looked hollow, like something vital had been carved out of her and left an empty space behind. She washed her face carefully, wincing at the sting of cold water on broken skin. She tried to make herself presentable, but there was no hiding what had happened. The marks were there, and they would stay there, a reminder that the world could be cruel and she was too small to fight it. She dressed quickly and left for work before her daughter woke. The bus ride was long and uncomfortable, every bump sending a jolt of pain through her ribs. She kept her head down, avoided eye contact, and prayed no one would ask questions she didn't want to answer. When she arrived at the diner where she worked, her manager took one look at her and frowned. "What happened to you?" "I fell," Nadia said. It was a lie, and they both knew it. But the manager didn't press. They never did. People like Nadia were easy to ignore, easy to replace. As long as she showed up and did her job, no one cared about the bruises. She tied on her apron and started her shift. The hours blurred together in a haze of coffee refills and half-eaten plates. Her body moved on autopilot while her mind wandered back to the night before, to the rain, to the car, to the man who had asked her why she was bleeding. She didn't know his name. She didn't know what he wanted. But she couldn't stop thinking about the way he had looked at her, like she mattered, like the answer to his question was important. No one had looked at her that way in a long time. By the time her shift ended, exhaustion had settled into her bones. She dragged herself onto the bus and leaned her head against the window, watching the city slide past in shades of gray and rust. She thought about going home, about holding her daughter and pretending everything was fine. But when the bus stopped near her building, she saw them. The men from last night. They were standing on the corner, laughing and smoking like they didn't have a care in the world. Like they hadn't beaten her and left her bleeding in the rain. Nadia's stomach dropped. Her hands started to shake. She stayed on the bus, frozen in her seat, as it pulled away and carried her past them. She didn't get off at her stop. She couldn't. Not with them so close. Not when she knew they would find her again. So she rode the bus in circles until the sun began to set, until the fear in her chest turned into something heavier. Resignation, maybe. Or exhaustion so deep it felt like surrender. When she finally got home, her daughter was waiting. The neighbor who watched her during the day was sitting on the couch, looking tired and annoyed. "You're late," the neighbor said. "I'm sorry." Nadia handed her the little money she had left, and the woman left without another word. Then Nadia scooped her daughter into her arms and held her tight, breathing in the smell of her hair and trying not to cry. "Mama, you're squishing me," the girl said, giggling. "Sorry, baby. I just missed you." "I missed you too." They ate dinner together, canned soup and stale bread, and Nadia tried to smile, tried to act like everything was normal. But her daughter was smart. She noticed things. "Mama, what happened to your face?" "I fell," Nadia said again. The lie came easier the second time. Her daughter frowned but didn't push. She just reached out and touched Nadia's cheek gently, like she was afraid it might hurt. "Does it feel better now?" she asked. Nadia's throat tightened. She nodded, unable to speak. After her daughter went to bed, Nadia sat by the window and stared out at the street below. The men were gone now, but she knew they would come back. They always did. People like that didn't forget. They didn't forgive. They took what they were owed, and if you couldn't pay, they took something else. She thought about running, about packing what little they had and disappearing in the middle of the night. But where would they go? She had no money, no family, no plan. Running was just another way of delaying the inevitable. So she sat there in the dark, waiting for the world to come crashing down. And then the knock came. It was soft, almost polite. 3 measured taps that somehow felt louder than they should have. Nadia's heart stopped. She stood slowly, her body tense, and crept toward the door. She didn't have a peephole. She didn't have a chain lock. She had nothing but the thin wood between her and whatever was waiting on the other side. "Who is it?" she whispered. No answer. She waited, her hand on the doorknob, her breath shallow. Then the voice came, low and calm and achingly familiar. "Open the door, Nadia." Her name. He knew her name. She unlocked the door and pulled it open just enough to see him standing there, the man from the car. He looked the same as he had the night before, composed, untouchable, wrapped in a silence that felt like gravity. "How did you?" "We need to talk," he said. Nadia glanced back at her daughter's room, then stepped into the hallway and closed the door behind her. She crossed her arms over her chest, trying to steady herself. "What do you want?" He studied her for a moment, his expression unreadable. Then he said, "The men who hurt you, they won't be a problem anymore." Nadia's blood ran cold. "What did you do?" He didn't answer. He didn't need to. The truth was written in the quiet certainty of his voice, in the way he stood there like someone who had already decided how the story would end. "I didn't ask you to." "You didn't have to." "Why?" she demanded, her voice breaking. "Why would you do that?" He stepped closer, and Nadia felt the air shift between them. His eyes were dark and endless, and for a moment she thought she saw something human flicker behind them. Something like regret, or understanding, or the ghost of a pain he had learned to bury. "Because no one else would," he said simply. And just like that, the ground beneath her feet disappeared. She didn't know whether to thank him or run from him. She didn't know if he had saved her or damned her. All she knew was that her life had just tilted in a direction she couldn't control, and the man standing in front of her was the reason why. If this story has already found a place in your heart, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and check the description box below for more stories that stay long after they end. "What happens now?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. He looked at her for a long moment, and then he said the words that would change everything. "You come with me." Nadia didn't go with him that night. She told him no, closed the door, and locked it with trembling hands. She leaned against the wood and tried to breathe, tried to convince herself that she had made the right choice. But the truth was already creeping in, cold and undeniable. The men were gone. He had said it so simply, like it was a fact of nature, and Nadia knew what that meant. She knew what kind of man could make people disappear. She knew what kind of world she had just stepped into, even if she hadn't meant to. She checked on her daughter one more time, then crawled into her own bed and stared at the ceiling. Sleep didn't come. Her mind replayed the conversation over and over, searching for answers that weren't there. He had protected her. He had avenged her. And now he wanted her to come with him. Why? The question haunted her through the night, and by the time the sun rose, she was no closer to an answer. She got up, got dressed, and went through the motions of her day like a ghost. Her daughter chatted happily over breakfast, oblivious to the storm building inside her mother. Nadia smiled and nodded in all the right places, but her thoughts were elsewhere. She dropped her daughter off at school and then stood on the sidewalk, staring at nothing. The world felt different now. Smaller, like the walls were closing in and she was running out of places to hide. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. ***, the office still stands. ***. Nadia's heart hammered. She deleted the message, but it didn't matter. He was already in her head, already under her skin. She could feel him there, quiet and insistent, like a shadow that wouldn't leave. She went to work. She poured coffee and took orders and smiled at customers who didn't see her. And when her shift ended, she walked outside and found the black car waiting. He wasn't inside, just the driver, who opened the back door without a word. Nadia stared at the open door, at the dark interior that felt like a choice she couldn't take back. She thought about her daughter, about the bills stacked on the kitchen table, about the men who were gone and the debt that was still there, waiting. She got in. The car moved through the city in silence, and Nadia watched the streets blur past. She didn't know where they were going, and she didn't ask. She just sat there, her hands folded in her lap, and tried to prepare herself for whatever came next. They stopped in front of a building she had never seen before. It was elegant and imposing, the kind of place that didn't belong in her world. The driver opened her door, and she stepped out onto the sidewalk, feeling small and out of place. Inside, everything was polished and pristine. The floors gleamed. The air smelled faintly of expensive cologne. A woman in a tailored suit greeted her with a cool smile and led her to an elevator that rose so smoothly she barely felt it move. When the doors opened, he was waiting. He stood by the window of a spacious office, his back to her, his hands clasped behind him. The city stretched out below like a living thing, all lights and movement and noise. He didn't turn when she entered. He just spoke, his voice quiet and measured. "You didn't have to come." "I know," Nadia said. "But you did anyway." "Yes." He turned then, and his eyes found hers. There was something different about him in the daylight, or maybe it was just that she was seeing him more clearly now. He was handsome in a way that felt dangerous, like a blade wrapped in silk. And there was a weight to him, a gravity that made it hard to look away. "Why?" he asked. "I don't know," she admitted. "Maybe because you were right. No one else would have helped me." He studied her for a long moment, and then he gestured to a chair. She sat, and he moved to the desk, leaning against it with his arms crossed. "I'm going to tell you something," he said, "and I need you to listen carefully." Nadia nodded. "The men who hurt you worked for someone who doesn't forgive debts. They are gone now, but that doesn't mean the debt is. It just means the responsibility has shifted." Her stomach dropped. To me, he corrected. "I took care of them. That makes you my problem now." "I didn't ask you to do that." "No, but I did it anyway." Nadia clenched her fists. "So what now? You own me." His expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. "No, but I'm offering you a way out." "What kind of way out?" "You stay here, under my protection. You work for me, and in return, I take care of your debts. I take care of your daughter's medical bills. I make sure you're safe." "And if I say no?" He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Then you go back to your life." and I can't promise what happens next." It wasn't a threat. It was a fact, and Nadia knew it. She looked down at her hands, at the scars and calluses that told the story of how hard she had fought just to survive. She thought about her daughter, about the future she wanted to give her, the one that felt farther away every day. "What would I have to do?" she asked. "Manage things. Oversee operations. You're smart. Resourceful. I've seen it. You don't even know me." "I know enough." Nadia laughed, a bitter sound that hurt her throat. "You're asking me to work for you, a man I don't know, doing things I don't understand, and I'm just supposed to trust you." "No," he said. "You're supposed to survive. Trust comes later." If you've ever felt torn between fear and love, you'll understand her. Remember to like, comment, subscribe, and check the description box below. Your support keeps stories like this alive. She looked at him, really looked at him, and saw the truth he wasn't saying. He didn't need her. He could have walked away and never thought about her again. But he hadn't. And Nadia didn't know if that made him her savior or something far more complicated. "I need to think about it," she said. "Take your time, but not too much." He handed her a card with a number on it. No name, just digits that felt like a door she could either walk through or close forever. "Call me when you decide," he said. Nadia took the card and stood. She walked to the elevator, feeling his eyes on her the whole way. When the doors closed, she let out a breath she didn't know she'd been holding. The car took her home, and she spent the rest of the day in a daze. She picked up her daughter from school and listened to her talk about her day, and she tried to act normal. But that night, after her daughter was asleep, she sat by the window and stared at the card in her hand. She thought about the life she had, the struggle, the fear, the endless, crushing weight of trying to keep her head above water. And then she thought about the life he was offering, the safety, the security, the chance to finally breathe. But nothing came without a price. And Nadia had learned a long time ago that the world didn't give without taking something in return. She picked up her phone and dialed the number. He answered on the first ring. "I'll do it," she said. There was a pause. Then his voice, quiet and certain. "Good." Nadia moved into his world 3 days later. She didn't bring much. A suitcase of clothes, her daughter's favorite stuffed animal, and a photograph of the two of them from a time when Nadia still believed in happy endings. Everything else could be left behind. Everything else was just weight. The apartment he gave her was nothing like the cramped, crumbling place she had lived in before. It was bright and spacious, with windows that overlooked the city and furniture that looked like it had never been touched. There was a room for her daughter, painted soft yellow and filled with toys Nadia could never have afforded. It felt like a dream. Or trap. She couldn't decide which. Her daughter loved it. She ran through the rooms with her arms outstretched, laughing in a way that made Nadia's chest ache. For the first time in months, the girl looked like a child. Not a burden. Not a worry. Just a child. Nadia stood in the doorway and watched her, and felt the weight of what she had agreed to settle over her like a second skin. He didn't come to see them that first day, or the second. He sent people instead, a woman named Elena, who showed Nadia how things worked. Where to go, what to do, how to navigate the structure of a world that ran on rules Nadia was only beginning to understand. Elena was efficient and detached, the kind of person who didn't waste words or emotions. She explained Nadia's role in clipped sentences, overseeing shipments, managing schedules, ensuring everything ran smoothly. It sounded simple. Too simple. But Nadia didn't ask questions. She just nodded and tried to keep up. On the third day, he came. Nadia was in the office, her office now, though it still didn't feel real, when the door opened and he walked in. He moved like someone who owned the air around him, calm and deliberate. He didn't knock. He didn't need to. "How are you settling in?" he asked. "Fine," Nadia said. It was a lie, but she didn't know what else to say. He studied her, his expression unreadable. "You don't have to lie to me." "I'm not lying." "Yes, you are." Nadia looked away. She hated how easily he saw through her, how his gaze felt like it reached past her skin and into the parts of herself she tried to keep hidden. "It's a lot," she admitted finally. "All of this. I don't know if I can do it." "You can," he said. "Or you wouldn't be here." "You don't know that." "I do." There was a certainty in his voice that made her want to believe him. But belief was a luxury she couldn't afford. Not yet. "Why me?" she asked. "You could have picked anyone. Someone who actually knows what they are doing. Why me?" He was quiet for a moment, and then he moved to the window, his hands in his pockets. "Because you're not like the others." "What does that mean?" "It means you understand what it's like to have something to lose. That makes you careful, loyal. The others, they're just here for the money. You're here because you don't have a choice. That makes you dangerous in all the right ways." Nadia didn't know whether to feel flattered or insulted. She settled for something in between. "And if I mess up?" she asked. "You won't." "But if I do?" He turned to look at her, and his eyes were darker than she remembered. "Then I'll fix it." It wasn't a promise. It was a fact, and Nadia felt the truth of it settle into her bones. She worked hard in the weeks that followed. She learned the systems, memorized the names, followed the rules. It wasn't easy. There were days when she wanted to quit, when the weight of it all felt like too much. But every time she thought about leaving, she looked at her daughter and remembered why she had said yes in the first place. The girl was thriving. Her health was improving. The medicine he provided was working. She laughed more, played more, became the child Nadia had always wanted her to be. And that was worth everything. But there was a cost. Nadia saw it in the way people looked at her, the subtle deference, the careful distance. They knew who she belonged to, even if she didn't say it. They knew she was under his protection, and that made her untouchable. But it also made her isolated. She had no friends here, no allies, just people who smiled and nodded and kept their thoughts to themselves. And then there was him. He didn't come to see her often, but when he did, the air in the room changed. He would ask her how things were going, and she would tell him, and he would listen in that quiet, focused way that made her feel like nothing else in the world mattered. It should have felt professional. It should have felt like business. But it didn't. There was something else there, something neither of them acknowledged but both of them felt. A pull, a gravity, a slow, inevitable slide toward something Nadia didn't have a name for. She tried to ignore it. She told herself it was just gratitude. He had saved her, after all. He had given her a life she couldn't have built on her own. Of course she felt something. It didn't mean anything. But late at night, when she lay in bed and stared at the ceiling, she thought about the way he looked at her, the way his voice softened when he spoke her name, the way he seemed to see her in a way no one else ever had. And she wondered if maybe, just maybe, she wasn't the only one feeling it. If your heart's racing too, take a breath. And don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and check the description box below for more unforgettable love stories. One night, he came to her apartment. It was late, and her daughter was asleep. Nadia had been sitting by the window, nursing a cup of tea and trying to quiet the noise in her head. When she heard the knock, she knew it was him before she even opened the door. He stood there in the hallway, looking tired in a way she had never seen before. His jacket was gone. His shirt was unbuttoned at the collar. He looked human. "Can I come in?" he asked. Nadia stepped aside, and he walked past her into the living room. He didn't sit. He just stood there, his hands in his pockets, staring at nothing. "Are you okay?" she asked. He didn't answer right away. When he finally spoke, his voice was quieter than usual. "Do you ever regret it?" he asked. "Saying yes. Coming here?" Nadia thought about it. Really thought about it. "Sometimes," she admitted. "But then I look at my daughter, and I remember why I did it. So no, I don't regret it." He nodded slowly. "Good. Why are you asking?" He turned to look at her, and there was something raw in his eyes. Something she hadn't seen before. "Because I wanted to make sure I didn't ruin your life," he said. Nadia's breath caught. She didn't know what to say. Didn't know how to respond to the vulnerability in his voice. "You didn't," she said softly. "You saved it." He held her gaze for a long moment, and then he looked away. "Get some rest," he said. "Tomorrow's going to be long." And then he left, as quietly as he had come. Nadia stood there in the silence, her heart pounding, and realized that the line between gratitude and something more had already blurred beyond recognition. Time moved differently in his world. Days bled into weeks, and weeks into months, until Nadia couldn't remember what her life had been like before. The fear that used to follow her everywhere had faded, replaced by something steadier. Routine. Purpose. A sense that she was building something, even if she didn't fully understand what it was. Her daughter was happier than she had ever been. The medical treatments were working. The color had returned to her cheeks. She ran and played and dreamed out loud about the future, and Nadia listened with a heart that felt too full to contain. But there was a cost to all of it, a price she was only beginning to understand. Nadia had become part of something larger than herself. She managed shipments, coordinated schedules, ensured that everything moved smoothly through the network he had built. She was good at it, better than she thought she would be. And people noticed. They treated her with respect now. Not the kind born of fear, but something closer to trust. She had proven herself, earned her place, and in doing so, she had become indispensable. But indispensable also meant trapped. She thought about leaving sometimes, about taking her daughter and disappearing into a life where no one knew her name or what she had done. But she knew it was a fantasy. She was too deep now, too tangled in the web of debts and loyalties and unspoken agreements. And then there was him. He had become a constant presence in her life, even when he wasn't there. She felt him in the decisions she made, in the way she carried herself, in the quiet moments when she wondered what he was thinking. He didn't come to see her often, but when he did, the world seemed to narrow to just the two of them. He asked her questions, not about work, but about her. What she liked, what she feared, what she wanted from a life that had never been kind to her. And she found herself answering, telling him things she had never told anyone. It should have felt dangerous. It should have felt like giving too much of herself away. But it didn't. It felt like being seen. One evening, he invited her to dinner. Not at the office, not in the apartment, but at a restaurant so exclusive Nadia had only ever read about it in magazines. She almost said no. It felt too formal, too much like something she didn't belong to. But he had looked at her in that quiet, steady way and said, "Just one night. No business. Just us." So she said yes. She wore the only dress she owned that felt appropriate, a simple black thing that made her feel both elegant and invisible. She left her daughter with Elena, who had softened toward them over the months, and tried not to overthink what the evening meant. When she arrived, he was already there. He stood when she approached, and for a moment Nadia saw something flicker in his eyes. Approval, maybe, or something warmer. They sat across from each other at a table by the window, and the city glittered below them like a promise. The conversation came easily. He asked her about her daughter, and Nadia found herself talking about the girl's dreams, her laughter, the way she had started to believe in the future again. And then he asked her something that caught her off guard. "Do you ever think about what you want? Not for her, for you." Nadia hesitated. "I don't know. I've spent so long just trying to survive. I'm not sure I know how to want things anymore." "You should," he said. "You deserve to." She looked at him, really looked at him, and felt something shift between them. It was subtle, like the first crack in a dam, but it was there. "What about you?" she asked. "What do you want?" He was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "I want to know that the things I've built mean something, that they are not just power and control, that they are worth it." "And are they?" "I don't know yet." There was a sadness in his voice that made Nadia's chest ache. She reached across the table without thinking and placed her hand over his. He looked down at it, and then up at her, and for a heartbeat, the world stopped. Then he pulled away gently, and the moment passed. They finished dinner in a silence that felt heavier than it should have. When he drove her home, neither of them spoke. But as she got out of the car, he said her name. Nadia. She turned. Thank you, he said. For tonight. She didn't know what to say, so she just nodded and went inside. But later, when she was alone in the dark, she thought about the way his hand had felt under hers, the way his voice had sounded when he said her name, and she realized that something had changed between them, something she couldn't undo. Before we close this chapter, take a moment, like, comment, subscribe, and check the description box below. Every small gesture helps the next story find its way to you. The days that followed felt different, charged, like the air before a storm. Nadia went through her routines, managed her responsibilities, smiled at her daughter, and tried to pretend that everything was the same. But it wasn't. She thought about him constantly, about the dinner, about the way he had looked at her, about the sadness in his voice when he talked about the things he had built. She wanted to ask him more, to understand him, but she didn't know how. And then the world outside began to close in. There was trouble. Nadia heard it in the hushed conversations, in the tense meetings, in the way people moved with a new kind of urgency. Someone was challenging him, encroaching on his territory, threatening the delicate balance he had worked so hard to maintain. She didn't know the details. She wasn't supposed to, but she felt the weight of it anyway, pressing down on everyone around her. And then he came to her. It was late, and she was working in her office when he walked in. He looked exhausted. His jaw was tight, his eyes darker than usual. He closed the door behind him and leaned against it, and for a moment he just stood there, silent. "What's wrong?" Nadia asked. "Everything," he said. She waited. He didn't elaborate. Instead, he crossed the room and sat in the chair across from her, his hands clasped in front of him. "I need you to do something for me," he said. "What?" "I need you to take your daughter and leave. Just for a few days. Until things settle." Nadia's heart stuttered. "Why? What's happening?" "It's not safe." "For who?" "For you." She stared at him, trying to read his expression. "Is this about the trouble I've been hearing about?" He nodded. "And you think they'll come after me?" "I think they'll come after anyone they can use to get to me. And you're more valuable than you realize." The words hung between them, heavy and undeniable. Nadia's hands clenched into fists. "I'm not leaving," she said. "Nadia." "No. I've run before. I'm not doing it again." "This isn't about running. It's about keeping you safe." "And what about you?" she demanded. "Who keeps you safe?" He looked at her, and for the first time, she saw something crack in his composure, something raw and unguarded. "That's not your concern," he said quietly. "Yes, it is." "Why?" She didn't have an answer. Or maybe she did, but she wasn't ready to say it out loud. So she just held his gaze and refused to look away. He stood slowly, and the distance between them felt like a canyon. "Please, Nadia, just do this for me." "No." He closed his eyes, and when he opened them again, they were filled with something she couldn't name. "Then stay close," he said, "and don't leave this building without telling me first." She nodded. He left without another word, and Nadia sat there in the silence, her heart pounding. She didn't know what was coming, but she knew it would change everything. The next 3 days felt like holding her breath underwater. Nadia stayed in the building, watching the world outside through windows that suddenly felt like berries instead of views. Her daughter sensed the shift, the tension that hummed through the air like a live wire, and asked questions Nadia couldn't answer. "Why can't we go to the park, Mama?" "Soon, baby, soon." But soon felt like a lie. People moved differently now. Faster, quieter. There were more guards, More locked doors, more whispered conversations that stopped when she walked into a room. Elena checked on them twice a day, her face carefully blank, but Nadia could see the worry in the tightness around her eyes. And him. She barely saw him at all. He was everywhere and nowhere, consumed by whatever war was brewing beyond the walls that protected them. Once, she caught a glimpse of him in the hallway, surrounded by men in dark suits, his face carved from stone. He looked at her for just a moment, and in that glance, she saw exhaustion and something that looked like regret. Then he was gone. Nadia tried to focus on work, but it felt hollow now. The spreadsheets and schedules that had once given her purpose seemed meaningless in the face of whatever was coming. She found herself pacing, checking the locks on the doors, watching her daughter sleep and praying to a God she wasn't sure she believed in anymore. Keep her safe. Whatever happens, keep her safe. On the fourth night, everything changed. Nadia was putting her daughter to bed when she heard it, a sound that didn't belong. Sharp, violent, the crack of something breaking followed by shouting in the distance. Her blood turned to ice. She grabbed her daughter, pressed a hand over the girl's mouth to keep her quiet, and pulled them both into the closet. Her phone was in her hand, shaking so hard she could barely see the screen. She called him. He answered immediately. Nadia. Something's wrong, she whispered. There's. I know. Stay where you are. Lock the door. Don't come out until I tell you. What's happening? Just stay there. The line went dead. Nadia held her daughter close, feeling the girl's heart hammering against her chest. She could hear more sounds now. Footsteps in the hallway, voices she didn't recognize, and beneath it all, the low, steady rhythm of her own fear. Minutes crawled by, or maybe it was hours. Time lost all meaning in the dark. And then the door to the apartment slammed open. Nadia's hand flew to her daughter's mouth again, keeping them both silent. She heard footsteps moving through the rooms. Heavy, deliberate, searching. She closed her eyes and prayed. The footsteps came closer, stopped outside the bedroom. The closet door rattled, and Nadia's entire body went rigid. Then a voice. His voice. Nadia, it's me. She nearly sobbed with relief. She pushed the door open and stumbled out, her daughter still clutched in her arms. He was there, standing in the doorway, and he looked like he had walked through hell to get to her. There was blood on his shirt. Not his, she hoped. His face was hard, his eyes blazing with something fierce and protective. Are you hurt? He asked. She shook her head, unable to speak. He crossed the room in 2 strides and pulled them both into his arms. It was brief, almost desperate, and then he stepped back, his hands on her shoulders. We need to leave, now. What happened? They breached the building. It's not safe here anymore. Nadia's legs nearly gave out. Where do we go? Somewhere they can't find you. He moved quickly, gathering only what was essential. Nadia dressed her daughter in warm clothes, grabbed the stuffed animal and the photograph, and followed him into the hallway. There were bodies there, men she didn't recognize, lying still in pools of red. She turned her daughter's face away and kept moving. They went down the back stairs, through corridors Nadia had never seen before. He led them with absolute certainty, one hand on her back, guiding her forward. They emerged into an underground garage where a car was waiting, engine already running. He opened the back door. Get in. Nadia climbed inside with her daughter, and he slid in beside them. The car took off before the door even closed, tires screaming against concrete. Her daughter was crying now, soft and scared. Nadia held her and whispered reassurances she didn't believe. Across from her, he sat in silence, his jaw clenched, his hands curled into fists. I'm sorry, he said finally. For what? For bringing this into your life. Nadia looked at him, at the blood on his clothes and the guilt in his eyes, and felt something shift inside her, something that had been building for months, maybe longer. You saved my life, she said quietly. More than once. This isn't your fault. Yes, it is. No, It's the fault of whoever came for us, not you. He looked at her then, really looked at her, and the walls he kept so carefully constructed seemed to crack. For just a moment, she saw past them to the man underneath, the one who carried the weight of an empire on his shoulders and still found room to care about a woman and her daughter, the one who was just as scared as she was, even if he would never admit it. The car drove through the night, leaving the city behind. Nadia watched the lights fade in the distance and wondered if she would ever see them again. Wondered if this was freedom or just another kind of cage. Her daughter fell asleep against her chest, exhausted from fear. Nadia stroked her hair and tried to keep her own breathing steady. "Where are we going?" she asked. "Somewhere safe," he said. "Somewhere no one knows about." "And after that?" "I don't know yet." It was the most honest answer he had ever given her, and somehow that made it easier to bear. They drove for hours, through roads that became smaller and darker, until they finally stopped in front of a house Nadia had never seen before. It was isolated, surrounded by trees, invisible from the main road. He helped them out of the car and led them inside. The house was simple but comfortable, furnished like someone had been expecting them. Maybe they had. "You'll be safe here," he said. "I'll have people watching. No one will get close." "What about you?" Nadia asked. "I have to go back. Finish this." Fear spiked through her. "You're leaving?" "I have to." "No." The word came out harder than she intended. He stopped, turned to face her. "I can't let you go back there alone," she said. "What if?" "I'll be fine." "You don't know that." "Nadia." "Please." Her voice broke. "Just stay. For tonight. Please." He looked at her for a long moment, and she saw the war in his eyes. The duty pulling him back to the city and whatever waited for him there. The part of him that wanted to stay. Finally, he nodded. "One night." Relief flooded through her. She carried her daughter to one of the bedrooms and tucked her in, kissing her forehead and promising her everything would be okay. She didn't know if it was true, but she said it anyway. When she came back out, he was standing by the window, staring into the darkness. "Thank you," she said, "for keeping us safe." "It's what I should have done from the beginning," he said quietly. "Protected you, instead of dragging you into this." Nadia crossed the room and stood beside him. She could feel the heat radiating from him, the tension coiled in his shoulders. "You didn't drag me anywhere," she said. "I chose this. I chose you." He turned to look at her, and the expression on his face was something she had never seen before. Vulnerable, open, almost afraid. "Why?" he asked. "Because you saw me," she said simply, "when no one else did." The space between them felt electric, dangerous, like standing at the edge of something she couldn't come back from. And then he reached out and touched her face, his fingers gentle against her bruised skin. "I see you," he whispered. And Nadia knew, in that moment, that she was already lost. If your heart's racing too, take a breath. And don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and check the description box below for more unforgettable love stories. They stood there in the silence, the world narrowed to just the two of them. His hand was still on her face, his thumb tracing the line of her jaw with a tenderness that made her chest ache. Nadia's breath caught. She should step back. She should put distance between them before this became something neither of them could control. But she didn't move. "You should rest," he said finally, dropping his hand. "So should you." "I can't." "Why not?" "Because every time I close my eyes, I see what could have happened tonight. What almost happened." His voice was rough, strained with an emotion he was barely holding back. Nadia felt her heart crack open. "But it didn't," she said. "We're safe. Because of you." He shook his head. "You shouldn't have to be in danger at all." "Maybe not. But we are. And I'd rather be in danger with you than safe without you." The words hung in the air between them, raw and honest and impossible to take back. He stared at her, and she watched something shift in his expression. The careful control he always maintained was slipping, giving way to something wilder. "You don't mean that," he said. "Yes, I do." "Nadia." "I do," she repeated, stepping closer. "I know what you are, what you do, and I'm still here. That should tell you something." He closed his eyes, and when he opened them again, they were filled with a pain that took her breath away. "You deserve better than this," he said. "Better than me." "Maybe, but I don't want better. I want you." The confession fell from her lips before she could stop it, and the moment it was out, she knew there was no going back. She had crossed a line she didn't even know existed, and now she was standing on the other side, exposed and trembling. He looked at her like she had just shattered something inside him. Then he pulled her to him, his arms wrapping around her with a desperate kind of need, and Nadia felt the last of her defenses crumble. They stayed like that for a long time, holding each other in the darkness, neither of them speaking. There were no words for what this was, no name for the strange, terrifying thing growing between them. Finally, he pulled back just enough to look at her. "I can't promise you a normal life," he said. "I can't promise you safety, or peace, or any of the things you should have." "I'm not asking for promises," Nadia whispered. "I'm just asking for this. For you." He searched her face, looking for doubt, for hesitation. But there was none. Just the truth, laid bare. And then he kissed her. It was gentle at first, almost tentative, like he was afraid she might break. But Nadia kissed him back with all the pent-up emotion she had been carrying for months, and something in him gave way. The kiss deepened, became urgent and desperate, a conversation they couldn't have with words. When they finally broke apart, both of them were breathing hard. He rested his forehead against hers, his hands cupping her face. "This changes everything," he said. "I know. There's no going back. I don't want to go back." He kissed her again, slower this time, and Nadia felt the world tilt beneath her feet. This was dangerous, reckless, everything she had spent her life trying to avoid. But it was also the most right thing she had ever done. They moved to the couch, unable to let go of each other, and sat there in the darkness, wrapped in each other's arms. Nadia rested her head against his chest and listened to the steady rhythm of his heartbeat. It was the first time in months she had felt truly safe. "Tell me about yourself," she said quietly. "The parts you don't show anyone else." He was silent for a long time. Then he started talking, his voice low and rough. He told her about his childhood, about the father who had built an empire and then lost it to violence and betrayal, about the mother who had died too young, leaving him alone in a world that didn't forgive weakness, about the choices he had made to survive, and the things he had done that still haunted him in the quiet hours of the night. Nadia listened without judgment, her hand resting over his heart. She didn't interrupt. She just let him speak, let him unburden himself of the weight he had been carrying alone for so long. When he finished, there was a heaviness in the air, but also a strange kind of relief, like something that had been festering in the dark had finally been brought into the light. "I'm not a good man, Nadia," he said. "I've done things." "I don't care," she said, cutting him off. "I don't care about the things you've done. I care about the man you are now, the man who saved me, who protected my daughter, who looks at me like I matter." "You do matter," he said fiercely, "more than you know." She lifted her head and kissed him again, and this time there was no hesitation, no doubt, just the two of them, finding something unexpected in the wreckage of their broken lives. They fell asleep like that, tangled together on the couch, and for the first time in longer than she could remember, Nadia didn't dream of running. She dreamed of staying. Morning came too soon. Nadia woke to sunlight streaming through the windows and the warmth of him beside her. For a moment, she forgot where she was, forgot the danger, the fear, the impossibility of what had happened between them. Then reality settled back in, heavy and inescapable. He was already awake, watching her with an expression she couldn't read. His hand was still resting on her waist, like he had been holding her even in sleep. "Good morning," she whispered. "Morning." There was a tension in the air, the weight of everything unsaid. Nadia sat up slowly, suddenly aware of how vulnerable she felt in the daylight. "I should check on my daughter," she said. He nodded and let her go. Her daughter was still asleep, curled up in the bed with her stuffed animal clutched to her chest. Nadia stood in the doorway and watched her, feeling her heart swell with a love so fierce it almost hurt. Everything she had done, everything she had sacrificed, had been for this. For her. When she came back out, he was making coffee in the small kitchen. The domesticity of it felt strange. Wrong, almost. Like they were playing at being normal people when they both knew the truth. "We need to talk," he said, handing her a cup. Nadia took it, wrapping her hands around the warmth. "I know. Last night was real," she finished. "At least for me." He looked at her, and the vulnerability in his eyes made her chest ache. "For me too," he said quietly. "But that doesn't change what's happening outside this house. The people who came after us won't stop. They'll keep coming until I deal with them." "Then deal with them." "It's not that simple." "Why not?" He set his coffee down and ran a hand through his hair, a rare moment of uncertainty. "Because if I do what needs to be done, there's no going back. It means war. It means blood. It means becoming the kind of man you shouldn't be anywhere near. And if you don't, then they'll keep coming, and eventually they'll get to you." Nadia felt the weight of the choice settle over them both. There was no right answer, no path that didn't lead to pain. "Then do it," she said. "Whatever it takes. I'm not afraid." "You should be." "Maybe, but I'm not." He crossed the room and took her face in his hands, his eyes searching hers. "If I do this," he said, "if I go down this road, you need to understand what it means. It means I might not come back. It means you might have to run, to hide, to live with the consequences of the choices I make." "I understand." "Do you?" "Yes." He kissed her then, hard and desperate, like he was trying to memorize the taste of her. When he pulled away, his expression was resolved. "I'll leave in an hour," he said. "Elena will come to stay with you. She'll make sure you have everything you need." "How long will you be gone?" "I don't know." Nadia swallowed hard, fighting back the fear that threatened to choke her. "Promise me you'll come back." He hesitated, and she saw the truth in his eyes. He couldn't promise that. He wouldn't lie to her. "I'll do everything I can," he said instead. It wasn't a promise, but it was enough. They spent the next hour in a strange kind of limbo, moving around each other in the small house, neither of them willing to acknowledge what was about to happen. Her daughter woke up and had breakfast, oblivious to the tension crackling in the air. When the car arrived, Nadia walked him to the door. He paused on the threshold, looking back at her with an expression that broke her heart. "Take care of yourself," he said. "You too." He nodded, and then he was gone, disappearing into the car that would take him back to the war waiting for him in the city. Nadia stood in the doorway long after the car had driven away, her arms wrapped around herself, and tried not to think about the possibility that she might never see him again. Elena arrived an hour later, professional and efficient as always. She brought supplies, updates, and a reassurance that felt hollow. "He'll be fine," Elena said. "He always is." But Nadia heard the doubt beneath the words. The days that followed were the longest of her life. Nadia tried to stay busy, to focus on her daughter, to keep her mind from spiraling into dark places. But every time her phone buzzed, her heart stopped. Every time a car passed on the distant road, she held her breath. And every night, she lay awake in the bed where they had held each other and wondered if he was still alive. On the 5th day, Elena received a call. Nadia watched her face shift, saw the tightness around her mouth, and felt her stomach drop. "What?" Nadia demanded. "What happened?" Elena hesitated. Then she said, "It's over." He won. Relief flooded through Nadia so powerfully she nearly collapsed. Is he? He's alive. But his heart? The relief turned to ice. How badly? He'll recover. But it's going to take time. Nadia didn't think. She just grabbed her daughter and started for the door. Where are you going? Elena asked. To him. Nadia, he said to keep you here. I don't care what he said. Elena stayed at her for a moment, and then something softened in her expression. Okay, I'll drive you. The drive back to the city felt endless. Nadia's daughter chatted beside her, unaware of the fear clawing at her mother's chest. When they finally arrived at the private hospital where he was being treated, Nadia didn't wait for permission. She just ran. She found him in a room at the end of a quiet hallway. He was sitting up in bed, bandaged and bruised, but alive. When he saw her, his eyes widened. What are you doing here? He asked. What do you think? She shot back. Before he could respond, she crossed the room and threw her arms around him, careful of his injuries but unable to hold back. He stiffened for a moment, and then his arms came around her, holding her tight. You're okay, she whispered against his shoulder. You're okay. I told you to stay safe. And I told you I'm not afraid. He pulled back just enough to look at her, and the expression on his face was something she would remember for the rest of her life. Awe, gratitude, love. You're impossible, he said. So are you. He laughed, and even though it clearly hurt, he couldn't seem to stop. And Nadia laughed too, because he was alive, and they were together, and for the moment, that was enough. Recovery was slow, painful, but Nadia stayed beside him through all of it, refusing to leave even when he told her she didn't have to. Her daughter stayed too, drawing pictures that she taped to the walls of his hospital room, filling the sterile space with color and life. The war was over. The people who had threatened them were gone, eliminated with the kind of efficiency that reminded Nadia exactly who she had chosen to stand beside. But she didn't flinch from it. She had known what he was from the beginning, and she had chosen him anyway. As the weeks passed, something shifted between them. The urgency that had defined their relationship gave way to something steadier, quieter. They talked about things that had nothing to do with danger or survival, about books they had read, places they wanted to see, dreams they had given up on and were starting to believe in again. One night, when her daughter was asleep in the chair by the window, he took Nadia's hand and pulled her close. I've been thinking, he said. About what? About after. When I'm healed. What happens next? Nadia's heart stuttered. What do you want to happen? He was quiet for a moment, choosing his words carefully. I want you to stay. Both of you. Not because you owe me, or because you're afraid, but because you want to. And if I do, then I'll spend the rest of my life trying to deserve you. Taze pricked at Nadia's eyes. She had spent so long believing that love was something other people had, something she wasn't allowed. But here it was, offered to her by a man who had seen her at her worst and still thought she was worth fighting for. You already do, she whispered. He pulled her down and kissed her, gentle and sure, and Nadia felt the last of her walls come down. They stayed in the city, but everything was different now. He stepped back from the darker parts of his empire, delegating to people he trusted and focusing on building something that wouldn't cost him everything. Nadia waked beside him, not as someone who owed him a debt, but as an equal, a partner. Her daughter thrived. She made friends, went to a good school, laughed more than she cried. And when she asked Nadia if he was going to be her father, Nadia didn't have an answer. Not yet, but maybe someday. One evening, months after everything had changed, Nadia stood on the balcony of the apartment they now shared and looked out at the city. The lights stretched out before her, endless and beautiful, and for the first time in her life, she didn't feel afraid. He came up behind her and wrapped his arms around her waist, resting his chin on her shoulder. What are you thinking about? He asked. How strange it is, she said, that the worst night of my life led to this. Do you regret it? Never. He turned her around to face him, and the expression in his eyes was soft, open, the kind of vulnerability he only showed to her. "I love you," he said. "I should have said it sooner, but I'm saying it now. I love you." Nadia's breath caught. She had known, of course, had felt it in the way he looked at her, the way he touched her, the way he built his life around hers. But hearing the words out loud was different. It made it real in a way nothing else could. "I love you too," she said. And when he kissed her, with the city lights glittering below them and the promise of tomorrow stretching out ahead, Nadia knew that she had finally found what she had been searching for all along. Not safety, not security, but someone who saw her and loved her anyway. Someone worth staying for. Before we close this chapter, take a moment, like, comment, subscribe, and check the description box below. Every small gesture helps the next story find its way to you. The seasons changed, and with them, so did everything else. Nadia learned to navigate the complexities of the world she had been pulled into, not as a victim or an outsider, but as someone who belonged. She was respected now, not just because of him, but because she had earned it. Her daughter grew taller, brighter, more confident. She called him by his first name at first, hesitant and shy. But over time, the name changed, became something softer, something that made Nadia's chest ache with a joy she hadn't known was possible. They became a family in the quiet, unspoken way that families form. Through shared meals and bedtime stories, through arguments and laughter, through the mundane, beautiful rhythm of everyday life. But the past never fully let go. There were nights when Nadia woke to find him standing by the window, staring out at the darkness with an expression she couldn't read. Nights when the weight of what he had done, what he continued to do, pressed down on him until he could barely breathe. On those nights, she didn't ask questions. She just went to him and held him until the tension eased from his shoulders and he could sleep again. And there were days when she thought about the woman she had been before. The one who had stumbled through the rain with blood on her face and nowhere left to turn. That woman felt like a stranger now. Someone from another life. But she was grateful to her. Because without her desperation, without her willingness to get into a stranger's car on the worst night of her life, none of this would exist. One afternoon, Nadia was working in the office when Elena came in with a strange expression on her face. "There's someone here to see you," she said. Nadia frowned. "Who?" "She says she's your sister." The world tilted. Nadia hadn't seen her sister in years. Hadn't even known if she was still alive. They had lost touch when Nadia's life had fallen apart, when the distance between who Nadia was and who her sister thought she should be became too wide to cross. "Send her in," Nadia said quietly. Her sister walked into the office, looking older but the same. She stood in the doorway, her eyes taking in the space, the expensive furniture, the view of the city. Then her gaze landed on Nadia, and something complicated flickered across her face. "You look different," her sister said. "So do you." They stayed at each other for a long moment, the years stretching out between them like a canyon. "I heard you were doing well," her sister said finally. "I didn't believe it at first." "Why not?" "Because last time I saw you, you were barely holding it together. And now—" She gestured around the room. "Now you're here." Nadia didn't know what to say. How could she explain everything that had happened? How could she make her sister understand? "Things changed," she said simply. "I can see that." Her sister's voice was sharp. "Who is he? The man who owns all this?" Here's someone important to me." "Important? Nadia, do you even know what people say about him?" "I know exactly what they say." "And you're with him anyway?" "Yes." Her sister shook her head, disbelief and something like pity crossing her face. "What happened to you? You used to have standards, morals." The words stung more than Nadia wanted to admit, but she didn't flinch. "I had a daughter to save," Nadia said quietly, "and when no one else would help me, he did. So yes, I'm with him, and I'm not ashamed of it." Her sister was silent for a long time. Then she said, I came here to see if you needed help, but I can see now that you don't. I'm sorry, Nadia said. I know this isn't the life you would have chosen for me, but it's mine, and I'm happy. Are you? Really? Nadia thought about it. Thought about the fear and the danger and the weight of the choices she had made. But she also thought about him. About her daughter's laughter. About waking up every morning beside someone who loved her. Yes, she said. I am. Her sister nodded slowly, and some of the hardness in her expression softened. Then I'm happy for you, even if I don't understand it. They talked for a while longer, carefully navigating the distance between them. It wasn't reconciliation. Not yet. But it was a start. When her sister left, Nadia stood by the window and felt the weight of the past settle over her. She had lost so much to get here. People. Pieces of herself. The version of her life she had once imagined. But she had gained so much more. That night, when he came home, she told him about the visit. He listened quietly, his hand resting on her knee. Do you regret it? He asked when she finished. Choosing this? Choosing me? Nadia looked at him, at the man who had saved her and broken her and put her back together in ways she was still discovering. Never, she said. And she meant it. Years passed. Not easily, but steadily, the way time moves when you're no longer running from it. Nadia's daughter grew into a young woman who was smart and strong and unafraid of the world. She knew the truth about the life they lived, the empire that surrounded them, and she had made her own peace with it. Nadia herself had changed in ways she couldn't have predicted. She was harder now, more certain, but also softer in the places that mattered. She had learned that love and danger could coexist, that strength came in many forms, and that the worst moments of your life could lead to the best ones if you were brave enough to follow where they led. He had changed too. The weight he carried was lighter now, distributed across the life they had built together. He still had darkness in him, still made choices that kept her awake some nights. But he was also the man who read bedtime stories to her daughter, who held Nadia when she cried, who had given her a life she never thought possible. They had never married, didn't need the paperwork to make it real, but they were bound together in ways that ran deeper than any ceremony. One evening, Nadia found herself standing in the same spot where she had stood years ago, looking out at the city. She thought about the woman she had been, the one who had stumbled through the rain with blood on her face and terror in her heart. That woman had been so afraid, so certain that the world was against her and there was no way out. But she had been wrong, because sometimes salvation comes from the most unexpected places. Sometimes the hand that pulls you out of the darkness belongs to someone who lives in it too. He came up behind her, the way he always did, and wrapped his arms around her. What are you thinking about? He asked. The night we met, she said. Do you ever wish it had been different? No, because then I wouldn't have this. Wouldn't have you. He rested his chin on her shoulder, and they stood there in silence, watching the city breathe below them. I asked you once why you were bleeding, he said quietly, and you didn't answer. Nadia smiled. I didn't have an answer then, but I do now. What is it? I was bleeding because I was breaking, but you put me back together. He turned her around to face him, his hands cupping her face the way they had that first night in the safe house, the way they had 1,000 times since. No, he said. You put yourself back together. I just gave you the space to do it. Nadia's eyes filled with tears, not from sadness, but from the overwhelming weight of being seen, of being known, of being loved exactly as she was. Thank you, she whispered. For what? For asking. For stopping. For seeing me when I was invisible. He kissed her then, soft and sure, and Nadia felt the past and present collapse into a single moment of perfect clarity. This was her life, messy and complicated and dangerous and beautiful, and she wouldn't trade it for anything. In the distance, the city glittered like a promise, like a reminder that even in the darkest places, there was light. Even in the worst moments, there was hope. And sometimes, when you're bleeding in the rain with nowhere left to turn, someone stops and asks you why. And that question changes everything. Nadia had learned that the hard way, but she had learned it, and she was grateful, because the men who mocked and fought her had vanished by morning. But she had stayed, had survived, had found love in the wreckage, and that was the only ending that mattered. If stories like this linger in your heart long after they end, don't leave just yet. Like, comment, subscribe, and check the description box below, and let the next story find you when the night grows quiet again.